It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Well, hello everybody, this is Phil Ferguson, and you are, of course, listening to the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. This is episode number 200, and if I had any decency or organization, this would be some kind of special, magical, maniacal show, but it's just a regular old show, so sit back and relax. Later on, we're going to have an interview with Andrew Seidel. He is a staff attorney for the FFRF, Freedom from Religion Foundation, and he is going to talk about the potential religious problems of a laundry list of cabinet picks by Mr. Trump. So he is going to go into very specific detail, so you will enjoy that immensely. And of course, before we get to that, we are going to have our Investing Skeptically topic. If you happen to be new to the show, first of all, welcome. The show is typically 1/3 finance, 2/3 atheism, but I can do whatever the fuck I want because the name is on the show. So, we're going to talk about CDs today, things that you get at your bank, not the music kind, the bank CD, certificates of deposit. One of the common problems I have with a lot of investors and clients and listeners today is that interest rates are really, really low. The way you get higher interest rates is by taking on more risk. And it's one of those things that people seem to think that bonds are just bonds and a bond is safer than a stock. Not necessarily true. If you get a very short-term bond, matter of fact, the shortest term bonds you can normally buy collectively as a group, it's called a money market account. And they are almost exclusively short-term government bonds. The money market account must have an average maturity of less than 90 days. And any individual security cannot be older than or have more than 1 year left on that certificate or that bond that's inside the money market. So very, very safe, very low interest, and probably today in early 2017, if you get 0.5% in a money market account, you're doing great. A year ago, that was 0 or 0.01 or 0.05, just some token amount to keep you in the account. You might be able to get up to 0.5% today, and a money market is the closest thing to cash. Cash, you get nothing, or if you have a savings account, you might get a fraction of a percent, but a money market, you might get 0.5%. The next thing you can do, of course, is a short-term government bond fund. You might make 1.5% or even 2%. Corporate bond fund that's short-term, you might make 2.5%, maybe, depending on when you're listening to this. But if you get higher interest rates, you must either accept longer-term bonds or lower-quality bonds. Not necessarily bad, but you need to be aware of it. I do, from time to time, have people send me the statements that they have from their account at the big name places, Edward Jones, A.G. Edwards, Merrill Lynch, J.P. Morgan, all of these kinds of companies. And they have half their money in bonds because they want to be safe, which may or may not be a good idea to start with. But over the last year, they've made an average of 6% in all these bonds. Well, if the going market rate for safe bonds is 2%, you should automatically wonder, how are you making 6%? A lot of the bond funds have crept into junk bond status. So it started out as a high-quality bond fund, but as the pressure is put upon the managers of the fund to have better results despite lower bond rates, they must fill it with higher-risk bonds. I don't have a problem with higher-risk bonds in and of themselves, but if you have half of your portfolio in bonds because you want to be conservative, and then you find out you're not being conservative, that is a problem. So something to pay attention to. So the topic for today with these CDs, I got off the subject a little bit there, is that people want something safe and they want something that pays a high rate. Well, first of all, like I said, that's not really how things work. But there's a couple of new things that people are getting, hearing about and asking me about, so I figured we would address it on the show. The first thing is what's called a step-up CD. And so a certificate of deposit that has a rising interest rate. So as an example, and I just did some Googling to find a few, a lot of these are 3 or 5 year CDs. So your money is tied up for a long period of time. But what it will do is in the first year, I'm just looking at one specific here, issued in Chicago by Community Savings Bank. The first year you get 0.75%. Okay, not too bad. The second year, 1%. The third year, 1.25%. The fourth year, 1.5%. And the fifth year, 2.75%. So that allows them to publish this CD as having an average compound yield of 1.45%, which sounds really high. It's really nice. The problem with a lot of these CDs is that they also have another feature called callability. That means at any time or at any break point in time, which could be once a year or once every 6 months or literally any day, depending on the rules that you agree to for that specific CD, it can be called, which means the bank or the financial institution that issued it can say, we are no longer supporting this, and they give you back your money, which is great. You got your money back, but you didn't get that teaser rate of 1.5 or 2.75% that you thought you were going to get in the fifth year. So sometimes there are slightly lower rates to start with, and this one that I pulled up is a great example because I looked at a place called bankrate.com, and they track all kinds of interest rates, mortgages, cars, and certificates of deposit. If you put $25,000 into a CD that's 1 year CD, you can get anywhere from 1.1, 1.3 maybe. So this step-up CD starts with 0.75. So you're losing about 0.5% per year. If you go to 2 year CDs, you're getting 1.4, 1.5%. And so even after the second year, you're not getting more money. And the longer you leave your money or tie it up, the longer you're going to get a better rate. And currently, the top CD rates, certificates of deposit rates at bankrate.com is 2% for 5 years. So that step-up CD that had 2.75% at the end only had a compounded rate of 1.45. So you're getting a lower average rate over time. Your money's still tied up for 5 years. And at any time, not at any time, depending on the rules of that specific CD issue that you're agreeing to, that can be called, and the bank can say, well, we don't want to pay 2.75%, so thanks for lending us the money for 4 years at a materially lower rate than the average person who buys a 4-year CD. So be aware of that kind of stuff if you buy something at the bank. CD rates, they're not horrible compared to short-term bonds, but they are very safe, as are short-term bonds, and CDs have the convenience of being in your bank. However, if you take the money out before the term of the CD, whether it's a 1 or 3 or 5 year CD, you will probably have to pay a penalty, and that penalty can vary greatly. Often it is the interest rate that you've been paid or the interest amount that you've been paid for a certain period of time, 2 months or 6 months or the entire year, depending, again, on the contract that you signed. So make sure you understand what you're doing. If you really don't want to invest money in a brokerage account or deal with a bond index fund, you can do a thing called laddering CDs. And what the laddering means is, you picture a ladder up against the building and you've got all these steps. So if you have $50,000 that you want to invest, but somewhere in the future you might need some of that money, what you do is you buy a 1 year, a 2 year, a 3 year, a 4 year, and a 5 year CD with $10,000 each. And that allows you to have access to some of your money in 1 year at a much lower rate, but to lock up some of your money for 5 years at a higher rate. And when the 1 year CD expires, if you don't need the money, you can roll it over now into a 5 year CD and get the higher rate. And you keep doing that. Each progressive year, you change over to 5 year CDs. So now you eventually have five year CDs that start at different years. So every year you have access to your money without a penalty. That can be a lot of work. Some CDs will automatically renew if you don't go in during a 6-day or 15-day period into the financial institution. So you have to pay very careful attention to that. Or, and this is my preference, you just get a short-term government bond index fund. You don't want one that's actively managed, because if you get one that has a 1 or 2% expense ratio, you will net out zero. So be aware of that. Even if they show you a long-term performance of 3 or 4%, that's fantastic, but that is, as they say, in the past. As an example, the Vanguard short-term government bond index has a 10-year return of 3%. You are not likely to make that in the next year or two. The long-term returns since 1994 are 4.2%. That's awesome to know as a historical fact, and it might be relevant in the future, but in the next couple of years, you just simply are not going to make 4.2%. If you get a long-term government bond, you can probably make, in the short run, 4%, but it's subject to interest rate fluctuations. And it's one of those rare times in history that it seems like it's pretty certain interest rates will be going up in the next year or two. So I have been saying this for a while, and I've been wrong for a while, but interest rates did go up twice in 2016, as at least issued by the Federal Reserve. We've talked about that on previous shows. And the consensus view from most economists is that they will increase by 0.5 to 1% in calendar year 2017. My bet is on 0.75%. I'm taking the middle road of the averages there, but I think that's very likely. So things to think about. Anyway, that's some ideas on CDs. Nothing wrong with them. Just make sure you understand what you are getting and what the cute little tricks, and if they're callable, and what the penalty might be if you need to take your money out. We'll take a short little break, and we'll come back and we'll hear from Andrew Seidel.
But in the bullshit department, a businessman can't hold a candle to a clergyman. Because I got to tell you the truth, folks. I got to tell you the truth. When it comes to bullshit, big time, major league bullshit, you have to stand in awe of the all-time champion of false promises and exaggerated claims, religion. No contest. No contest. Religion easily has the greatest bullshit story ever told. Think about it. Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish, where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time. But he loves you.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
All right, everybody, welcome back. And with me today, I have Andrew Seidel. He is, at least unless I've got a title change here, a staff attorney for the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. How are you?
You're not senior attorney or anything new, are you?
Nope, just still the typical constitutional attorney, staff attorney here at FFRF, working to uphold the wall of separation between state and church. You know, we are the watchers on the wall, as they like to say in Game of Thrones.
That's right. You can't handle the truth, and but you have to. And, of course, listeners, Freedom From Religion Foundation, you can Google them and find them quite easily. What is the actual web address?
The web address is ffrf.org, and we are a membership-driven organization. We depend on membership support to do the work we do. But more importantly, we depend on our members to help unite their voices with ours so that we can't be ignored. So everybody should join.
I like it. And maybe a little later on we'll talk about some legal cases. Most listeners probably know of the FFRF, but if you don't, you got to go check it out. And, of course, you got to listen to this episode and tell all your friends, because caring is sharing. So one thing that I do know is that you have, at least for the past few weeks, maybe at least a couple of months, you've kind of been the point person, shall I say, in charge of keeping an eye on Donald Trump and his appointments for the White House stuff thingies.
Yeah, that's correct, and it's been quite a job. This is a very scary list of people that he has put forward.
Well, I know the FFRF put out a meme, a picture, an image, an ad even that listed a whole bunch of them and how they're all tied to religion, and that's kind of special for my show. So pick a few and tell us about them and what are their good strengths, if they have any.
Well, all right. Let's take Ben Carson. Everybody should know who Ben Carson is.
That Ben Carson?
He ran for president. He is the same guy who said that evolution is from the devil. He also believes that the pyramids are used to store, or were used to store, grain because the Bible says so. Specifically, a character in the Bible, Joseph, said so.
Everyone knows that the pyramids are actually landing platforms for the Goa'uld from the TV show. So it's not grain storage. That's silly.
Well, so this man with his extensive knowledge of structures and their use is going to be in charge of housing and urban development, which he has, by his own admission, no experience for.
Now, didn't at some point he publicly announced that he will not be taking any offices because he's incompetent?
That was earlier on when his name was being bandied about for the Department of Education.
Right, but he said, I'm not competent. I mean...
Yes, he did. He specifically said, I don't think he used the word incompetent, though that would certainly apply. I think he said inexperienced, which is pretty amazing, too, to turn around after running for president and say, I'm not fit to serve in the president's cabinet, but I thought I was good enough to serve as president. Also should tell everybody something about that.
Yeah, it was a rare moment of intellectual honesty. Maybe he happened to be wearing a tinfoil hat at that moment and it stopped the alien rays. But yeah, to run for president and then after losing badly, come out and say, I'm not capable, I'm not experienced enough, I'm not able, whatever the words are, to even be on the cabinet, let alone the president. It was comical and great fun when he said it. But now something has changed, and he's not only willing and able to, he apparently is going to be in charge of HUD?
Yes, it's pretty unreal. And I mean, the rest of his cabinet is almost exactly like this. Jeff Sessions, who is his nominee for Attorney General, in his confirmation hearing went after secular lawyers. He said, like me, like secular lawyers, secular people really can't understand truth. Because how would they possibly understand truth if you don't believe in God? And he said this in the context of Sheldon Whitehouse asking him whether or not he would purge secular lawyers from the roles of the Justice Department. Which, he kind of shrugged this off almost. It was a stunning moment. And when put it in context, you're talking about a man who is essentially admitting that he's going to go through the roles. And if you're not Christian or you're not religious, at least, you're going to get bounced out of the Justice Department. That was the line of questioning Sheldon Whitehouse was taking him down. And he did not give sufficient answers to alleviate my fears on that front.
Oh, and it's interesting. I saw that video clip, and it looked like for a good 30 to 40 seconds, he was giving a very nimble, politically correct answer, and then he kept talking.
Yeah, and there's a moment where when he says it, when he says that secular people can't understand the truth, where he gets this look, and it's sort of this kind of this smug look where he thinks he's made this great joke, and nobody laughs, and it's dead silent. It was one of the quietest moments in the hearing, and then he kind of realizes he just made a huge mistake, which that in itself is, I think, progress for the secular movement. Not that he was up there, but the fact that people reacted the way they did after what he said.
Yeah, I kind of saw it as what often happened when George W. Bush said something. He'd say something, and it was the most brilliant thing you could possibly say until the words escape his lips, and then he just sits there and he looks at you like, did I use my outside voice? Did I actually say that out loud? And this was one of those moments where he was trying really hard to be careful with his words, and then he got asked another angle, and he's like, no, I don't think that secular people can understand the truth. And you're just like, what?
It's pretty amazing, and people should go watch the clip. I mean, it was a stunning moment to see in the halls of We the People at the Capitol, to see somebody say that. I mean, you're talking secular people, you're talking 23% of the population, and when you're talking about attorneys who tend to have, by definition, a higher level of education and therefore tend to be less religious because of that, you're talking about maybe, let's say, 30% of the Justice Department that may not be religious.
And I think, depending on how you interpret words, which is good fun for the show, secular does not mean non-religious.
Sure.
Secular means that I respect the rule of law and that the laws should supersede religion and people are free to practice or not practice whatever faith they want. I think in a high-level legal department like the U.S. government, that's going to be a good 2/3 of the people may now not be qualified according to the guy in charge of the department.
Yeah, I think that's a fine argument to make, and I would really like, people ought to, if they're up for it and they do watch this, they ought to send an email to Sheldon Whitehouse and thank him for his defense of secular Americans, because it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's almost surprising that those questions were asked, and I was very delighted, but then it went bad.
Yeah.
Because at some point, sometimes these people honestly say things that they're thinking, and that's one of the things that's bad with this rapid-fire appointment system. I mean, it's not just Trump coming in, but when Obama got elected, you've got to appoint a lot of freaking people, and they've either got to get approved or not approved in a short period of time. So that's a systemic problem. And do I understand correctly that, at least in theory, we have absolutely no foreign representatives anywhere in the world because Trump ordered them all to quit?
Well, so that I'm not as up on, but there are, I think, about 680 Senate confirmable positions, and I do believe a lot of those are ambassadors and people like that, which, you typically wait for a replacement before you ask the others who were serving previously to step down. It's just the whole transition has been amazing to watch because it's been bungled really in a lot of ways. But the cabinet appointments, which is what I've been watching closely, and the potential Supreme Court picks are they're scary. I mean, take Rick Perry.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Everybody also knows Rick Perry. FFRF has actually sued Rick Perry Rick Perry was governor.
Pray for rain, Rick Perry.
Yeah, he wanted to pray for rain for his state because his state caught fire.
He had a whole stadium, empty, but
so
stadium.
He wanted to. So he organized, in his official capacity as governor, a prayer rally called The Response. He recorded a robocall that says, "Hi, I'm Governor Rick Perry. Come pray with me." Basically, he sent out letters on the governor letterhead. Used all these official resources to get people together to pray. So FFRF sued over that. We were actually dismissed on standing, but it had the effect we hoped for because Rick Perry stopped using the governor's office and the title to promote the prayer rally. So it did have an effect, unlike his prayers, which had absolutely no effect, and the state had the worst fires in its entire history.
Well, maybe God misplaced it by several years and a couple thousand miles, and that's why California now has rain.
Possibly.
What if you're wrong?
He's up for the Department of Energy, right?
Yeah.
And he also wanted to completely dispose of the Department of Energy, famously.
And not only did
he couldn't remember its name.
That's right. You jumped the gun on me. That's brilliant. He named the three agencies. He named that there were three agencies he wanted to dismiss or eliminate, and he named two of them, but couldn't even remember the name of the department. And now apparently he has said, well, now that I know what the department does, it should stay. And of course, admitting that up until a few days ago, maybe a couple weeks if I'm being generous, he had no idea what the department did, and now he's in charge of it. Or will be.
And one of the things that it does is it's in charge of a lot of our scientific research. So first of all, it controls our nuclear arsenal and maintains the safety of it, which...
Yeah, that's not scary.
Not scary at all.
No, what could go wrong?
You're talking the former, for instance, Obama's two heads were physicists. One of them won a Nobel Prize, and Rick Perry lost Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah,
as my friend Kevin Cruz pointed out. So you're talking about someone who's maybe not the most competent individual to be running it, and is actually pretty anti-science. And this is the department that runs a lot of the nation's scientific research. It's responsible for a whole boatload of Nobel Prizes and Nobel Prize research. And you have a man here who doesn't believe in evolution and is not sure how old the Earth is. Doesn't think science can tell us that, who's going to be running the department that does that research now, which to me is terrifying. And of course, what influences Perry's ideas on that score is his religion.
Now, isn't Rick Perry also the guy who accidentally made a commercial that promoted Brokeback Mountain?
That I have not heard.
Yeah, there was a commercial where he's out walking in these beautiful sweeping views, and he's got on an outfit that looks just like a character from Brokeback Mountain, which is a famous gay cowboy kind of film. And it was great fun to mock that. But of course, he's also a homophobe. Doesn't accept science, doesn't know what the department does, but could you, who could, well, Ken Ham would be worse, right? But how do you pick people this bad? I
think it goes to the judgment of the person who's choosing these candidates. It's stunning.
The next thing you're going to tell me is that he picked someone who wants to destroy the education system to be in charge of education. But thankfully, that's not the case, right?
I am going to tell you that, sadly. Betsy DeVos.
Come on, man.
So during her tenure, she wants to the extent possible, destroy the public school system. And that really is not an exaggeration. She'll do that through vouchers, which I'll get to in a second. But what is left over, the remnants of the public school system, she wants to use to impose her religion on other people's children. People can go Google this. She has said this many times that she believes that public schools should be able to promote her religion. She talks about using them to promote the kingdom and things like that. It's very scary talk.
And it's not her private. When you say her religion, you're not saying Christianity. You're saying her very unique and specific form of Christianity. Of course.
That's what every government official wants to do. They want to use has these theocratic tendencies anyway.
Right.
They want to use their public position to promote their personal, and it is very personal, religion. And that's what FFRF is here to prevent. That's what I do every single day, is work to make sure they can't do that. Now Betsy DeVos, her primary goal is going to be to take the money that the federal government uses on public schools and divert that to religious schools. That's going to be her primary way, to shunt kids into the religious school system by funding religious schools more and better than the public school system.
Well, now I've had many people argue with me that things like school vouchers, it's about better education and it's not about religion. What say you?
Yes, except it's not, because vouchers do not work. This has been looked at and tested, and the facts are very, very clear. Vouchers do not work. Milwaukee has been doing vouchers for, I think, like 15 years now, and they just simply don't work. And they also create a lot more problems than they solve. One problem that people don't know about that never really comes up, but is a big problem, especially in Milwaukee, is you get these schools that they pop up overnight, and they're religious schools, and they take a bunch of government money, $1 or $2 million a year, and then they fold and they disappear. And essentially what you had is these small churches create this school to suck a bunch of government funds out, didn't provide any education to the children, and then disappear. And it's not an uncommon thing. I mean, in addition to the fact that they genuinely do not work, you have these abuses because it's really an unregulated system. So it's a big problem.
I would say, there are rare exceptions, but in general, private schools, these charter schools, at best, systematically underperform. At worst, it's a cesspool of fraud. And on top of all that, right, they are also used to promote religion. So you have public money being used to indoctrinate children into a religion. You're absolutely right. It's like you're reading my freaking mind, Andrew. I love it. They're promoting religion, so it's not secular in any way. And then the last thing that people don't seem to understand is that if you have a public high school that has been built 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago for hundreds of millions of dollars to hold 2,000 students, if 500 of those students leave with vouchers to go to private schools that pop up, the students that are left behind now have less options, less classes, and a lot of the overhead. That building can't shrink by 25%. There's things that are set in place. There's fixed costs that must be paid every year. There's buses that aren't being used that were bought. There's a building that was bought that they have to pay the mortgage on that is not being used. So the schools get put in a huge financial disadvantage because a lot of the expenses stay, but the money leaves. And then politicians can come back and go, look, the schools can't even balance their budgets. We should take more away from them.
And there's two things I will say to that. So one other point on that note is that the schools also have to follow all the laws and regulations set up, meaning they have to educate everyone, regardless of their race or their sex or their handicap.
Right.
That final one, if you have a disabled child or a child who's got a learning disability or a physical disability of some kind, that can put a huge financial pressure on the schools. And that's something we as taxpayers should all pay for. We want everyone to succeed and we want everyone to be educated regardless. But private schools are allowed to turn those kids away. And this was something that Betsy DeVos talked about, albeit in a rather ignorant fashion during her confirmation hearing, and basically said, yeah, these religious schools are still going to be able to turn away those kids. So the cost of education per student is also going to be going up in public schools, which goes to what you're saying about the politicians then looking and saying, hey, let's take more money away. And Trump, second point, even touched on this in his inauguration. He said, and this is pretty darn close to a quote, that the public schools are flush with cash, which I don't know what planet he is living on, but it is not this country where the public schools are flush with cash. They are underfunded just about everywhere. So again, this is very scary, and it's one of those issues and one of those fights that doesn't have just an impact for these 4 years. But when you're talking about a 4-year gap in kids' education, that can have an impact for a very long time to come. In some cases, even that person's lifetime.
Well, I mean, just imagine if you're in 4th or 5th grade and you learn next to nothing for a year or two.
Yeah.
And then let's pretend for a minute in our fantasy world that everything gets fixed. You go back into the school, you're behind. Now, that's not very motivational, I don't think, for the student that's behind. They're not going to be encouraged, and they're probably, because kids get these ideas that, the reason must be me. I'm not smart, and so now I'm just going to slog along, and I'll do what I have to, as long as I have to try to get a degree, if they even try that. Now, of course, there's exceptions to everything, but it's it's very demotivating. And what does that create as a future generation as far as our educational system? We've gone from this incredible high ideals created by the space age and the space race of learning science and maths and all this stuff to now we don't want educated people in charge. I was talking about Davos on Facebook, and someone came on and said, well, had you given any thought to the fact that this person might come in and have fresh ideas? And I said, no, quite honestly. And when you have a brain surgeon, do you want the janitor to come in and give it a go? Because they have fresh ideas.
Well, and also the ideas aren't fresh. They've been tested in they've been tested in school systems around the country, and they don't work.
Right. It's not like
yeah,
she's been successfully running IBM or Exxon. Yeah. Oh, wait. What do you think of that guy?
Well, Tillerson's not too much on our watch list. He doesn't appear to have an outwardly religious agenda or appear to be an issue for state-church separation the way Carson and DeVos and Perry and Sessions, who all very clearly are going to use the office to promote their personal religion, will be. Another one, you have Sonny Perdue, who's up for agriculture secretary.
Yeah. When
his state had a drought, Georgia, what did he say to do? Pray for rain, because that's been successful in the past. Scott Pruitt is another theocrat we're on the lookout for. He is up for EPA administrator, and that's also kind of like putting the fox in the hen house. He's sued the EPA a number of times and is pretty much going to dismantle that agency to the best of his ability. When he became Attorney General of Oklahoma, he actually shut down the Environmental Enforcement Agency, Environmental Enforcement Task Force that was under his control. So you can imagine what he's going to do to the EPA. But I've actually tangled with him specifically on quote-unquote religious freedom issues. I got a number of public schools in Oklahoma to stop handing out Bibles. They were letting Gideons come into the classrooms and hand out Bibles to kids. And Scott Pruitt, after I wrote a letter to the schools and explained why that's highly illegal, as courts have said, Scott Pruitt wrote a letter to them and said, you can go ahead and do that. I'll defend you, even though it's been declared unconstitutional by courts. So he's okay with, again, using the public school system to promote his brand of religion. Now,
are you aware of, I think it's called the REINS Act? Have you heard of that?
No. In Oklahoma or federal? Or?
No, federally, and listeners will correct me if I'm wrong here. A few weeks ago, while we're all worried about Trump's Twitter account, apparently the House passed a rule saying that agencies would no longer have the authority to make their own rules. They would only have the ability to make proposals, which would come to the Senate and the House to be voted on.
That's interesting from an administrative law standpoint. That raises some issues because typically a lot of the rulemaking authority those agencies have gotten, the only way they can have that authority is from Congress in the first place.
Right.
Basically, Congress will say something broad like, you have to ensure that there's, say,
safe drinking water.
Yeah. But not even that broad. That let's pick something specific, that there's not particulate matter in the drinking water above a certain level, and then the EPA can go out and make some rules on how companies need to go about doing that. But even that is a little more broad than Congress would do. I'll have to look into that. I'm surprised at that, and I wonder, do you know if it actually? I mean, it just passed the House. I'd be surprised if that's.
Well, and that's one of those things people will say, well, it hasn't passed the Senate yet. And I go, but we live in a new world, man. It's REINS Act, I think it is.
Well, I will definitely look at that.
I'm using the Google in real time, listeners.
And another thing that we ought to touch. I'll just touch on two other folks that Trump has proposed that are likely. Well, one of them's already sailed through. Mike Pompeo is a former congressman and he's now head of the CIA. He got confirmed. He is a evangelical Christian with a rapture fetish. He's one of those guys who is very excited about the world ending, and he's going to be in charge of the CIA. So,
and what could go wrong with that, right?
And then you have Mike Flynn, this famous lieutenant general who, well, not famous, I should say, infamous for his not rational anti-Muslim views, just bigoted anti-Muslim views, and believes that Christianity is at war with Islam, and by Christianity he means America. They're one and the same. So he's a good person that you want at a very high level advising a president with a thin skin as well.
Absolutely amazing. Have you had any input or thought or involvement with the Obamacare and the votes on that?
Not a terrible amount, at least
Okay.
not from an FFRF standpoint. The thing actually that I've spent most of my time working on right now, in addition to all those, is looking at Trump's Supreme Court picks.
Oh, talk to me about Supreme Court. This is going to be great, right? I mean, they stalled for a year, and they probably want a vote right away, right?
Yeah, I mean they're gonna try to push it through. So the one difference with the Supreme Court is that the Supreme Court is one of those positions where you need 60 votes to overcome the filibuster. Trump needs 8 Democrats, unless the GOP decides to take the nuclear option and rewrite the rules. So basically to do away with the filibuster. Let's assume they don't do that. If they don't do that, right now the general consensus seems to be that there are 3 guys from his list of 21, and I've been investigating all 21 on the list, who Trump is most likely to pick. Bill Pryor from the 11th Circuit, Alabama. Thomas Hardiman he went to Notre Dame and is up in Pennsylvania right now, and Neil Gorsuch, who's on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. Pryor is just going to be a nightmare on state-church separation issues. Gorsuch is not going to be much better. Hardiman is a little harder to read, but will also be something of a problem. But Bill Pryor seems to be, he was considered the frontrunner for a very long time. Most people this past weekend have been saying that Gorsuch is now caught up to him, but either one of them is going to be really, really bad.
And these are the 3 best that you just described.
These are the 3 most likely. The list Trump is working off of came from the Heritage Foundation, which is this conservative organization with some input from the Federalist Society, I believe, also a conservative legal organization. But if you take Neil Gorsuch is 49 years old. He's on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is in Colorado. Encompasses a bunch of the Midwest, the mountain states there. He signed on to the opinion in the Hobby Lobby case, which went to the Supreme Court and was then upheld, which said that companies have a free exercise right of religion because their employers have a particular religious belief, and that transfers to the company, and then the company can trample on the rights of the employees because of that religious belief. He signed on to that opinion. He is, I don't know if to put it nicely, he's completely happy to allow any religious display on government property, including 10 Commandments and crosses. He's been very critical of decisions by his fellow judges that one decision American atheists took, which took down roadside crosses in Utah that were emblazoned with this, state of Utah insignia, basically.
Right.
The lawsuit took down those crosses, and he spoke out against that decision, or wrote against that decision. There was another case where the 10 Commandments monument was removed from a county courthouse. He wrote against that decision as well. So he's not going to be friendly to state-church separation. And he definitely seems to be in with the idea that we should redefine religious freedom to mean I can impose my religion on you, which is essentially the way the Hobby Lobby case went. There's an opinion piece he wrote for the National Review back before he was even a judge. And in it, he attacked, quote, American progressives and liberals for their, quote, overweening addiction to constitutional lawsuits. So that doesn't bode well for groups like FFRF and ACLU and Americans United that defend people's constitutional rights and civil liberties by taking those lawsuits. So that's problematic, and that's Neil Gorsuch, who's possibly the front runner. Bill Pryor is even scarier. again, I focused on state-church separation because that's what FFRF does. But if you skip his state church stuff, he called Roe versus Wade the worst abomination of constitutional law. He's had a number of opinions that come out against gay rights. There was a very simple case where a public school district tried to put a disclaimer sticker on their biology textbook saying that evolution is just a theory.
Right.
I mean, it's a very simple case, and the district court decided it correctly, but Pryor said that no, there's not enough evidence to show that it was religious. You need to redo this, which is kind of nonsense. The only reason you would have a sticker on it like that is because you believe in creationism. In a brief to the Supreme Court, he said that he compared homosexuality to, quote, necrophilia, bestiality, possession of child pornography, and even incest and pedophilia. So he's not necessarily a friend to the LGBT community. But again, if you just look at his state church record, it's really terrible. And FFRF is going to do a press release today about Pryor's record on this. So if people want to know more about it, they can visit our website and read it. I'll just touch on just a few things real quick. He likened groups such as FFRF and the ACLU that bring lawsuits to vindicate First Amendment, state church separation, to terrorists in a brief to the Supreme Court. He basically said that we are like the Taliban who destroyed the Bamiyan Buddhas, if people remember that event, because we're trying to scrub all public lands of religious iconography. He is he is for school prayer. He's said that. So that is problematic. That's one of the probably longest standing precedents we have in state church separation, is that school prayer is unconstitutional. Of course, kids remain free to pray on their own if they want, but not.
I always thought if prayer actually worked in school, wouldn't that be cheating?
There you go. I mean, that's like the old joke. Of course, you can't ever outlaw prayer in school as long as there's math tests.
Yeah. Dope.
So another thing is Pryor is actually he looked to Jeff Sessions as his mentor for a long time. So when Pryor was the assistant attorney general for Alabama, deputy attorney general for Alabama, Jeff Sessions was the attorney general. And I'll give you one guess while they were in Alabama who they were really big fans of defending. I'll give you a few hints.
Roy Moore?
You got it.
I studied.
So now, but this is actually amazing. So this is before Roy Moore was sitting on the Alabama Supreme Court and before he was nationally known. Okay, so he had a county court, in Etowah County, Alabama, and this is back in the late 1990s, 1997, 98. FFRF's local chapter sued Roy Moore because Roy Moore had a Ten Commandments monument in his courtroom, a little one, a wooden one, and he was also bringing in people to have a Christian prayer before every one of his court sessions. And so FFRF's local chapter sued because of that, the Alabama Free Thought Association. And normally that case would, litigate and it would go up to the Supreme Court, and that would be how the case progresses. But instead, Sessions and Pryor sued Roy Moore also because they agreed with him. And this is just an amazing and a really extraordinary way to attack the case. It's something that just does not happen. So our legal system completely depends on adverse parties who are litigating a case to the fullest. So when the Alabama Supreme Court got Pryor's lawsuit against Roy Moore, who agreed with everything he was saying, they laughed him out of court, essentially. They said that there is no controversy whatever, not even a contrived one. This is not what lawsuits are about. And probably the most amazing thing to me is that right after that, he declared himself a campaigner against frivolous lawsuits and even coined the term government lawsuit abuse to pin on attorney generals who were suing tobacco companies, even though that was pretty much one of his first lawsuits, was this enormous abuse of power.
I was waiting. I was waiting. I wonder if their strategy was that the two cases would be, I don't know what the right word is, put together, adjoined. Is that?
That's how courts look at it. So that's
right. So if two parties are
the proper way to have done it would have been to weigh in on Moore's side as either an amicus brief or to actually go in and represent Moore or to say you're representing the county or something like that, but definitely not to actually file a whole separate lawsuit against Moore himself.
Well, I was just
for instance, the way you
if
kick off a lawsuit is you file what's called a complaint, and the complaint has numbered paragraphs and it lays out all your factual allegations and your causes of action and all that. And when we file a complaint, we get back a answer that denies almost everything. Right? Because when you first get a lawsuit, you don't want to admit that anything has happened. So you try to deny absolutely everything you can. I've never seen a complaint that admits anything more than maybe, say, 25 or 30%, certainly no more than half of the allegations that the plaintiff makes. Roy Moore admitted to everything, every single paragraph in the complaint except for one. So it was really an extraordinary tactic to take, and it was certainly an abuse of power. So, and that's not even scratching the surface. We could spend another hour talking about him, but I would suggest that the best thing for people to do would be to go look at the FFRF website to learn more about him. And then when Trump makes his announcement, which is supposed to be, I think Thursday, February 2nd, he has said, when Trump makes his announcement that day, we will, if it's not prior, whoever it is, will publish what information we have about that person.
That is absolutely amazing. Now, if I can switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
We talked before, it's been a long time now. How's the book coming?
The book is coming along. We're really getting near. Still, sadly, do not have a publication date, which is frustrating. There's been a big lag, and then things get thrown in the middle. Family, babies,
life happens.
You elect a tyrant and have to devote all your time and resources to fighting that. So it's a slow process, but I mean everything is there and it's done. So I'm really hoping to have a publication date soon, and I'll update everybody who asks on my Facebook and Twitter pretty regularly about the book. So people can find me, Andrew L. Seidel, on either one of those. I have Instagram too, but I don't really talk about my book on that.
Yeah,
pictures of
I have some of those accounts too. And if I had looked really hard, I could figure out how to log back into it. But that's how often I'm there. So, is there anything else that we should cover today, Andrew?
Oh man, we could. I mean,
you guys got some court cases going on? Do you know anything about those?
For hours. Yeah, I mean, well, for instance, we just filed one last week against Mercer County, West Virginia. The public schools there are teaching. They've been teaching Bible class for decades, which is pretty poorly written class. It's teaching the Bible as factual truth, so that's a problem. So we've sued them. So far this month, we've sent, I think we're over 50 letters on state church violations already. We've gotten 2 crosses removed from public property, one in Santa Clara, California, and one in Belle Plaine, Minnesota, which has exploded, and there's a huge blowback in that town. It's fun to watch if people want to go check that out. So, as always, FFRF is chugging along. We are winning. We are fighting like hell for you, the listener, for you, FFRF members. We'd encourage everybody to join. And we're going to keep doing what we do.
Great. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me here on the Phil Ferguson Show.
Always a pleasure, Phil. Thank you.
He loves you and he needs money. He always needs money. He's all powerful, all perfect, all knowing, and all wise. Somehow, just can't handle money. Religion takes in billions of dollars. They pay no taxes, and they always need a little more. Now, you talk about a good bullshit story. Holy shit.
want to thank you for listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. It is a unique combination of 1/3 finance and 2/3 atheism. The show is number one in that category. I want to promote the philosophy of science-based investing. Sadly, most advisors are paid commissions by a big company to sell you investments that underperform. Sometimes they make more money with your money than you do. I think the financial services industry is a lot like religion. They create fear. They provide a solution to that fear. They take your money, and they often get more benefit from it than you do. Remember, people work for who they are paid by. You want a fiduciary advisor that is paid only by you. If you have questions about investments, want to roll over an old 401k, or need to make a plan to build your very own everlasting nest egg, you may contact me, Phil, at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com. Together, we can protect children from religion, promote a secular worldview, fight the grip religion has on our society, and improve your financial future. Well, we've gotten to that part of the show where we get to wrap things up. I do have a couple of emails that I've received that had some comments about the show, so I wanted to share those with you. In this case, I am just going to give you their initials because it's it wasn't public. It was sent to me, so just the initials this time. From KS, I really appreciated your openness in discussing your mom's passing. If you're a new listener, unfortunately, back in October, my mom passed away. So at some point, I talked about all of that. Let me go back to the email here. First time I cried in my work van driving to a job site. I will inevitably have to deal with my parents passing, and it's not something we discuss much as a culture. That ends that comment. And absolutely true, and one of my intents is to have someone on from Death with Dignity in the future. So if you're in that organization and you're listening to this podcast, go ahead and contact me. Of course, it's Phil at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com. Otherwise, I'll be reaching out to them at some point here. Another email from KM. Thanks for your time and the advice, wisdom, skepticality, and gratuitous fucks you send out to the world. So I know that I've gotten a few dings on iTunes reviews for profanity. I've tried to keep it a little more modest, but if one or two swear words here and there bother you, you're just not going to be happy. So that's part of who I am and how I talk. The other thing that I've got that is a little different, a few weeks ago, we talked about ways to end Christianity. And one of those is to take back the culture, take back holidays, and even take back Christmas music. And one of my listeners apparently is an expert in this field. His name is Brian Wise, and I don't know if I have permission to give out his email address, but what I do have his permission to do is to ask for your help. If you play an instrument, if you write songs, if you know how to produce, if you know an engineer, or anybody in the musical industry or that can play any music, and they want to be involved in a project to make a Christmas secular album, he is willing to donate time and a lot of effort to put one together. He has been recording Christmas music for, I think he said, 2 decades. So he has a lot of experience doing this and doing this over the internet. So you can play your part from your little home studio, and he will blend them together. However that works, it's beyond my skill set, but he has the skills to do this. This is all volunteer thing. And matter of fact, when the music gets done, there'll probably have to be some kind of fundraiser to actually put out an album or a CD, and someone will probably have to investigate copyright issues. But he wants to put it together. So if you know anyone, if you are that someone that can play music or have anything to do with the musical industry, let me know. And I will connect you to Brian Wise, or you could probably Google him or look on Facebook. But send me your contact information and make sure you're really clear in the headline that you want to be involved in the Atheist Christmas album. And I will connect you with Brian, and you guys can work that all out. I am not going to be an active part of this. I love the idea of it, and I want to do what I can to help, and that's why I'm talking about it on the show. So, again, if you have any interest in making music, Christmas music, secular Christmas music, let me know, and I will connect you with Brian Wise. That is it for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you in person sometime soon. Ciao.